Welcome to Too Many Podcasts, the podcast about podcasts. Now, podcasting from the Sherpa Chalet on Mount Podcastia, here's your host, Jim, the podcast Sherpa.
Hey there, Rebels. It's me again. We're back. Could you believe that we've actually made it halfway through the season? We've actually passed the halfway point. I'm really excited about that, and my listenership is really starting to grow, and I'm really appreciative of that. Thank you very much. I think I will always be thankful for that, even if I don't get to say it every week. Let's talk about goals for a little bit, if you don't mind. There were certain things that I wanted to do with the show, like improving the sound, and I think that I've made an improvement with the sound, and I can probably even do better with that. And another thing is about guests and topics. You know, I've had some really great guests. I've been incredibly lucky. I've had all sorts of people in all sorts of fields, some who've been around the world, some who live around the world in different places other than Mount Podcastia. I guess that's kind of easy to do. I've spoken to people who've been in movies. I've spoken to people who've written books. And I've interviewed people who just love to do podcasts, and that's a lot of them. And one of my goals for this season was to do a show about science. And I was so lucky because this week, wait a minute, before I say it, let's play the song.
It's theme week, it's theme week, it's theme week.
Okay. I guess that was the giveaway, huh? So we are doing a science-themed show today. And I'm really happy about that.
Who's our guest today, Sherpa?
Our guests are co-hosts of a podcast called Just Nah Science. And what they do is they take information that's presented in social media and they debunk it using actual science, because both of them actually do have a scientific background. And we'll find out about that as we get into our interview. Their names are Nick and Lauren, and they are engaged. They're going to be married in November of 2020. So when you hear this episode 5 years from now, you can say, wow, they're happily married already. Wow, time flies. See, and then I'll still feel like I'm halfway through the season. Anyway, you know what I'm going to say, right? That today's podcast is being brought to you by Audible, and you can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/Sherpa. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. So instead of going down to the conference room at the Sherpa Chalet, why don't we head on down to the laboratory at the Sherpa Chalet to hear my interview with Nick and Lauren of Just Nah Science. Hey, everybody. Guess what? We're going scientific tonight, and we've got not one, but two podcast hosts to join us, and we're going to talk a lot about science. So I'm actually going to appear somewhat smarter by the end of this interview. Well, I'll keep my fingers crossed anyway. So let's see what they can do. They have a podcast called Just Nah Science, and of course we were debating if it's nah or nah. We'll handle that later. Anyway, everybody, say hello to Nick and Lauren.
Hey. Thanks so much for having us.
You two are engaged, so congratulations.
Thank you.
That was nice that they said thank you together like that. Now you're getting married next November?
Yeah.
Yes. Are you having a science-themed wedding?
I would like it to be as nerdy as possible. I'm a big there's a big video game that I play way too much according to Lauren, and I want the music from that game playing, and it keeps getting vetoed.
So what do you think, Lauren?
I gave myself like at least 3 vetoes for his ideas, and that's definitely one of them.
So what about like test tubes for champagne toast?
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, actually,
I didn't even think of that.
I kind of like that.
You could do your wedding vows off a periodic table?
Yeah, you know, I should have contacted you a long time ago about this. You have some great ideas.
Do you do wedding planning?
I may have found another career. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right, so I am currently a science teacher for a high school, and I've had a long career with science. This is my second career. Before this, I was actually a zookeeper. So I wanted to stay in like the bio and science field as I moved on, but was always interested in as a kid. We did lots of camping, and so it's just something I continued to pursue as I got older.
I am a clinical research scientist. Most of my training was in bench research, studying a lot of neuropharmacology and neurotoxicology. I have a master's in neuroscience. My focus was neurodegenerative diseases, but currently a lot of the things I do are trying to get drugs approved by the FDA.
You both have very varied scientific backgrounds. What first got you into getting into science?
Ooh, the one real thing, I feel like Nick knows we're going to go with this. In high school, I ended up going to science camp one summer. And Nick never lets me forget it. That's my one regret, is that I told him I did that. And
she told me on our first date. How do you expect me to let it go?
I had to be open about how nerdy I was. But yeah, ever since then, I'd say, you know what? I can't, there's no turning back now. So
I had a little bit more of a traditional route, which is in high school, I was very into chemistry. I continued to pursue science through college. And then I took a neuroscience class my junior year of college and absolutely loved it, and decided at that moment I'm going to focus on the brain.
What prompted you to want to do this podcast? Was it just that you were reading so much and just shaking your head and going, nah?
Honestly, that's exactly it.
Yeah, we would constantly have conversations. Like, we would see these ridiculous posts about fake science, and we would just have these conversations like, well, if we had a podcast, this is what we would say back to that. And it just kept snowballing. And then we're like, you know what? I think we should just do this, because at the point where we're just so frustrated at what we were seeing, that we're like, somebody, meaning us, has to do something about this.
Why do you think, in the first place, that people question what's really established scientific facts?
I think there's a really large following of individuals online who don't know how to decipher what is a valid source or a credible source from those that aren't. It doesn't help that the internet already is a very murky place, and trying to navigate different scientific avenues or channels can be really difficult. So it's a lot easier to look at someone's Twitter and, see what they're saying and be like, oh yeah, that sounds right, even though it couldn't be further from the truth.
You ask me, it's because I didn't pay attention in science class.
Oh, God.
I guess it's probably a little bit of both, too. I was kind of thinking that, all of a sudden you just reject what you learn in school and you see something online and say, well, that makes sense. Yes, we were descended from lizard people, and
we would be so much cooler if we were.
But all that shedding and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
I mean, social media, unfortunately, as much as there is opportunity to network, there's also the rise of all these conspiracy theories. And we're going to talk a little bit about that coming up in our conversation. But do you feel like you're kind of swimming against the tide when you're trying to explain things to people and saying, look, science dictates this, and you're saying this, which makes zero sense?
I really do. I think there's a point in which you can present as many facts as you want to someone, but ultimately, if they're not receptive to it, if they're not willing to understand or see someone else's point of view, they're not going to care. Then they're just going to continue to live in their bubble and continue to believe what they want, no matter what you demonstrate to them.
And, you wonder what exactly is to be gained by doing that, too. There are people who say, well, the Earth is flat and the borders are just blocks of ice and they're guarded. If the Earth was flat, why would it have to be guarded at the end of the Earth? That this is the reality that you would live in. But, that's proved that that's not the case.
Well, the new idea from people who believe in flat Earth is that it actually follows a Pac-Man effect, where if you go across the Earth, you just kind of end up back on the other side, which would make travel so much easier.
I wish. I mean, I've never experienced that, but that'd be pretty efficient. I guess we're going to get to Australia. I don't know.
Yeah, and you could probably save a lot of money on Southwest, too. you're doing an episode coming up about climate change, so we wanted to discuss some of the things that get brought up in regards to the Earth. And is that okay if we can discuss that?
Yeah.
Of course.
Okay. So one of the things, not directly with climate change, but I know about the decline in the bee population. Now, people are saying, well, that's because of all the cell phones.
Oh, cell phones. That's a good one. Yeah, I actually haven't heard that one yet. I've heard a lot about like government wanting to control the population on purpose to create like a food demand because, they're hand in hand with like corporations. And I don't know. It just, we were discussing this and you come to find that honeybees are actually, yes, they're very important for the ecosystem, but they also generate a ton of money in food production. So it just seems like very counterintuitive. Like, why would you want to kill them off if they are producing like billions of dollars in food production for you? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, no, it's there was a study, an estimate in 2005 that the global crops that were pollinated by honeybees were valued at $200 billion in 2005. That was a while ago now. I'm sure that value has gone up. And each year we're losing 30 to 40% of our honeybee population. So if these government agencies or whoever were so they were really cared about making money, you would think they would have more food production for higher consumption across the globe versus trying to drive prices up with demand. Most people won't be able to buy it. So who are you catering to?
That's right. You'd have a jar of honey that would be worth $150 or something like that.
Yeah, and it's not even just honey. I mean, name a food, and bees are probably responsible for it in some way.
So what do you think caused the decline in the population, just so we know that it's not a government plot?
There's this invasive species of mites that are plaguing honeycombs and bee populations. Weather changes specifically is a big one. And then there's this colony collapse disorder, which is this phenomenon where just a majority of worker bees in a colony disappear. They leave behind a queen, and then they all just take off, and we really don't know why it's happening. I just think it's pesticides, fungicides that are present in maintaining agriculture, and then even loss of genetic diversity. So we're breeding the same bees over and over again, and they're not able to cope with disease or changes to the environment.
And one of the other issues was weather control.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that one we talked quite a bit about in the podcast. And, we did some research to find like some monetary values. And what did we say? That there have been within the past.
Since 1980.
1980. Okay. So there's been almost $1.7 trillion in damages from like major storms. So if the government could control weather, why wouldn't they stop these like extremely havoc-causing storms? Like we would save a ton of money. So again, it just seems like counterintuitive to the cause.
Yeah, it's one of those things like part of the skepticism with a lot of these things is blaming it on the government. Government doesn't care about the people; they just want the money. But like Lauren just said, $1.7 trillion in damages, and it wasn't just overall storms. Since 1980, there were 254 climate or weather-related disasters, and each one of those resulted in damages of over $1 billion. So just 254 weather or climate-related disasters caused that $1.7 trillion. And if the government didn't care about people, they certainly care about money. Why wouldn't they do something about this? You think they want to protect their pockets?
I had sent Nick a list of topics, if he wanted to discuss them on tonight's interview, and one of them was a quote from the Alex Jones show, and I know how much people love Alex Jones on social media, and I think the quote was that the Air Force was behind some of the storms that attacked Texas. And
yeah, I actually looked a little bit further into it, just out of curiosity, because there's this thing called HARP, and I'm trying to remember what it stands for. It's like High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. It's this big, fancy setup that the U.S. military has in Alaska, and so many people have claimed that it's the cause of different natural disasters. I think even the president of Venezuela at some point said it caused like an earthquake in Haiti or something like that. And none of it is founded in any actual science. Does anyone know what HARP is? What it does? All it does is it measures a portion of the atmosphere called the ionosphere. And that's important for radio communications, radio signals. And the military wanted to see how this specific layer of the atmosphere could be better controlled for communication purposes. That's it. That was it.
And of course, it has to become a conspiracy theory that, oh, here's the plot against us, and so on and so forth.
Of course.
So what other types of episodes do you have coming up for your podcast? You want to give a little spoiler or a little preview?
Well, yeah, we have a couple. We have a long list of topics. One of the ones I'm personally excited about is talking about zoos, just because there's always a lot of talk about like if zoos are ethical and do they really aid in conservation efforts. And since I have a background in zookeeping and I've seen a few different types of zoos, I have a little bit of insight into what actually goes on behind closed doors. So I'm excited.
She has some crazy stories about zoos. She got attacked by a monkey once. It was wild. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, no, that really happened.
Everyone's always like, great joke. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it's not a joke.
Yeah, she has the scars to prove it.
Yeah.
I interviewed a guy named Scott Johnson who does a podcast called What Was That Like? And he talks to people who've had like interesting experiences. That sounds like a story that would be like, well, I was attacked by a monkey. I should hook you guys up for a little conversation.
Yeah, interesting is definitely one way to describe that encounter. So.
But I'm looking forward to, I want to do an episode on alternative medicine, things like healing crystals, stuff like that. There are so many just, I'm going to use quote unquote treatments for ailments that they just don't work. They're nothing. They're not even like, I don't have a word for it. They're literally nothing.
Pseudoscience.
Yep, the old pseudoscience. That's where I got some of my suggestions when I wanted to talk to you. I was like, oh, pseudoscience, we could probably find a lot of topics in here.
Yeah.
There's good in trying to look at things in other ways. I mean, you guys having the scientific background and say, what if? But to just make these presumptions that are just so far off the mark with no basis in science whatsoever.
Yeah, I find it so incredibly interesting that some people will wholeheartedly jump on ideas like alternative medicine that have like no scientific founding. But when it comes to something like climate change evidence and research, they're so like hardened against it. And so I just think that's so interesting that they're willing to put a lot of faith in something that they can't really find a footing in. And something with evidence is just like, no, I don't think so.
I think it was kind of like what Nick said earlier, too. It says if they don't want to accept certain things, they're just going to stick to their guns and
right.
Yeah. Everyone has a narrative that they're trying to support constantly, not just in science and everything you do. And so all the people you talk to and associate with, they're all trying to fit this narrative that you're building for your life and the world. So if healing crystals is a part of it, then you're going to support it. But I personally believe in, you have to be critical of data, whether it supports or goes against your arguments. You have to be able to look at it objectively.
Now, let me ask the both of you, what are you the most curious about?
Me personally, it's the aging brain. There's so many ways that as we grow, that our brains can malfunction. And it's incredible it doesn't happen more often. When you really think about everything that has to happen correctly in development, it's borderline miraculous. So how neurons interact with each other and small molecule interactions, that is something I'm always interested in learning more about.
Yeah, and I guess because you studied neuroscience too, the old adage that you only use 10% of your brain,
that is a misnomer.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Your brain is 100% active. Really what they're getting at with that is you can only focus so much on one particular task, which is why when you're driving and you're looking for an address, you turn the radio down. You don't need to, but you only have a limited amount of blood in your brain, and it gets directed to different parts of the brain depending on what you're doing. So you focus more on your eyes than you do on your hearing, and that's really where that kind of stems from.
How about you, Lauren?
That's a tough one, but one of my favorite topics to delve into is sociobiology, just because I found it so intriguing how similar a lot of animals, especially apes, really are to humans. And I really do feel like they are a lot more like us and think more like us than we have realized at this point and give credit to. Kind of scary almost. It's a little uncanny. And honestly, a close second with terms of like an interesting topic is climate change, because I'm just so interested, but also terrified to see where this is going to go.
You said top thing you're interested in.
I couldn't decide. Sorry.
You think there are things that are kind of beyond science?
Lauren believes a lot in paranormal and ghosts and things like that, and I don't. I wish they were real. I hope they are. That make the world a lot more interesting. But I'm sure there's stories, especially from other podcasts that we've listened to, that someone experienced or made a statement about that I couldn't explain with science. I'm sure there's plenty of things like that.
I believe a lot in it, but I do love to entertain those ideas. I really do. I don't know, Nick is shaking his head, but yeah, I think there's just some things you can't truly explain, or at least we haven't figured out yet. But I think they're absolutely fascinating stories of the paranormal.
How would the both of you encourage people to learn more about science and get their facts straight?
Oh, that's super easy. You check out our podcast. But aside from that, I think it's pay attention to trends, right? You don't have to look very far. You can look at anything in your day-to-day life and be critical and objective, and you can learn a little bit more about the scientific process. Follow things like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye. They are great sources of information.
Yeah, and something I try to drive home with my students myself is you need to really look at your sources. Where is your information coming from? Yeah. There's a lot of things out there like, oh my gosh, look at all these scientists who say climate change isn't real. And then you dig into the paper a little bit that wrote this, and you realize, oh, it was funded by, the oil and gas industry. And like, oh, well, I don't know if this source is so unbiased now that I'm seeing where it's coming from. So being conscious of where the information is coming from.
Yeah, and making sure the deck isn't stacked, so to speak, too, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
When they see your title of your podcast, Just Nah Science, the people go, well, that's sodium.
Well, sodium is a part of sodium chloride, which is salt. It's close enough.
And sodium sounds like so dumb.
No.
Why?
No.
Yeah, that's good. You've been coming up with some zingers, and I need to. Yeah, no, this is really making me realize I am not as funny as I think.
Nick is being very restrained tonight, folks. Yeah, I think, you know what? We see, before we did this interview, he said, all right, I'm going to try not to curse. And he's done a really great job at it. Now he's probably thinking, I got a great line, but don't curse. Great line, don't curse.
It is a constant struggle.
The struggle is real.
You have no idea. We're going to end this call, and I'm just going to let them all out. Our downstairs neighbor is going to call the police like, oh my God, I think something's happening up there.
All right. Since we were talking about podcasts, what are some of the podcasts that you guys like listening to?
Well, now I'm a big fan of Odd Tonic, actually, thanks to your show, because they talk about the supernatural. And I'm honestly, I've really been just dabbling in a lot of different ones because I'm just really curious as to what's out there. So I've been listening to a lot of podcasts done by women. I want to see the vibe they give out, just a lot of different science podcasts. And I'm always listening to NPR too, as boring as that may sound. I do love NPR and their podcasts.
Some of my favorites are My Brother and Me, The Adventure Zone. I listen to Wait, Don't Tell Me, which is an NPR program. Myths and Legends is another really solid one. I think those are like my top three.
Now we have the portion of the show that you guys are probably well familiar with, and it's called Shameless Self-Promotion.
Shameless self-promotion.
And if you could let everybody know, how they can find your show and if they want to get in touch with you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thanks. The podcast is called Just Nash Science. Nash spelled like N-A. Our website is justnashscience.com. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook. The links are on our website, so you can do everything straight from there. And that's it. We are not.
Well, we're on a couple of different platforms too. So if you like Spotify, we're there, but we're also on Apple and Google Play for those who use an Android.
Yeah, you can get the links to every platform we're on through our website at justnashscience.com.
There you have it. Just Nash Science or nah. Like you said, that's going to determine the seating arrangement for your wedding?
I have not figured out if I say nah or nah in regular speech now. You have me questioning everything I know.
I think Nick's going to be really super self-conscious the next episode that you guys are going to be recording.
I'm self-conscious about it right now.
Anyway, I will let you guys go. Nick and Lauren, Just Nah Science. Learn a lot, too, while you're checking their show out. And learn to get your facts right, thanks to these two. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
And now it's time for Sherpa Suggestions.
I really enjoyed listening to Just Nah Science. Just a little warning, sometimes the language can be a little bit salty, so if you got little kids around, they may or may not want to hear it, but who knows? Maybe your kids have filthy mouths too, I don't know. If you enjoy Just Nah Science, here's a couple of other science podcasts that you can check out. We have Star Talk Radio, and that stars Neil deGrasse Tyson. Daniel and Jorge Explain the Universe. Science Rules with Bill Nye, that's in its second season. Science Friday, and Science Versus, where they take on a lot of different topics and explain the science behind it. Just be sure that you don't make anything explode while you're listening to these podcasts. Safety first, Rebels! Safety first! Thanks again for listening to Too Many Podcasts, the podcast about podcasts, where you can hear a new episode every Wednesday, don't forget. And I'm on all of your favorite podcast platforms, so I'm pretty easy to find. And you can even find me on your computer as well. Special thanks to Nick and Lauren of Just Nah Science. There's another podcast for you to take a look into if you're into science. They are really informative, and they were just wonderful people to talk to. Like I said, I really appreciate them swinging by the Sherpa Chalet for our little chat. You can find me on social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the name of the podcast, Too Many Podcasts. Twitter and Instagram have the number 2. La 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 la. I wanted to let you know that very shortly, probably within the next month or so, all of our social media and our website will have one name. So it'll be easy here for me to remind you guys what to check out, and it'll be easy for you to remember where to find it if ever you're interested in telling somebody about the podcast, or if you want to check out some episodes that you may have missed. I'm always here for you. If you've got any questions, please feel free. Email me, jimthepodcastsherpa@gmail.com, if you've got questions about the show. If you've got a request for a theme of the show, so we can just play the theme week song, I know you love to hear it, you can do that too. And even if you've got any problems with the podcast, by all means, drop me a line. Let me know if there's a problem. Maybe there's things that, like I said, I might need to fix. that I may be completely unaware of, because I am completely unaware of many things. I know of one thing that's going to happen next week. Our guest will be a lady named Rhonda Straw, and she hosts a podcast called One Bad Review, and it's about online reviewing. And we do talk about online reviews and the power that they have in society, and we have a little fun with it as well, with an Amazon online review too. You could leave me one good review if you go to Apple Podcasts or even iHeartRadio or Stitcher.com, where you can hear this podcast. Say a couple of nice things. Let people know that they can check this podcast out and that they will enjoy it. They will enjoy it, right? You think they're going to enjoy it? Please, please, please. I'll give you money. No, I can't give you money. Not allowed to do that. No, I don't have any money to give you. Okay, Mr. Bruce, I'm talking myself into a corner. Get us out of here. Please show them the door, sir. I mean, see you next week. And viva la Sherpalution. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Too Many Podcasts. Please disperse. You can go home now. I said you can go home now. Viva la Sherpalution. Viva la Sherpalution. Oh. Yeah, I'll come back now, you hear?